Okay, hi class. My name is Anila Chowdhury. I'm doing my project on race and class in Brazil. The reason I chose this was because I've always heard that Brazil was one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. And so I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to look up how race played into their everyday culture. Basically, Brazil was discovered by Portugal in 1500s. When the Portuguese originally came, it was inhabited by the natives of that land, which were Amerindians. Um, Brazil changed a lot, and so did a lot of the Caribbean, with the African slave trade. There was a lot of fighting between different countries, and a lot of African slaves were captured in these sort of inner battles and wars and brought over to Brazil. Couple statistics for you. The Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, the IBGE, did a census bureau to talk about race in Brazil. They allowed Brazilians to identify themselves in 5 categories, which were white, brown, black, yellow, and indigenous. 49.4% of the people polled classified themselves as white, which would usually be like European, a lot of Germans, famous Giselle Bundchen, the model. Then brown, which was 42%. And this is basically Europeans that were mixed in with African and the Amerindians. Black, 7.4%, which was straight African. Yellow, 0.5. A lot of Japanese immigrants have come into Brazil, so that's that population. And indigenous, which was about 0.3%. The major cultural history in terms of race in Brazil was that the Brazilian government, after gaining independence, wanted to whiten Brazil. It's probably the best way to say it. They basically believed that the Europeans had a superior lineage, so that's what they wanted to do. In 1890, there was a decree. It was called Decree 528, and it basically closed immigration to African and Asians and only allowed for it with the Europeans. The European immigrants came from mostly Italy, Germany, Poland, obviously Portugal. And from about the 1920s onwards, it was more Middle Eastern, such as Lebanese, Syrian, and that's when the Japanese migration happened. The Brazilian government, I hate to say it, was, from my readings, very racist towards their kind for a long time. They wanted a mostly white, like, Brazil. They There was actually a law that was passed in the first article, and I quote, "It is prohibited the entry of settlers from the black race in Brazil, and to Asians it will be allowed that each year a percent equal to 5% of those existing in the country." So basically, they were saying that if you're black, don't even bother coming in, and if you're Asian, little by little you can migrate into the country. Even with this said, there was a lot of mixing between slaves and whites, and it was generally accepted, which is really different from the U.S. because in the U.S., slaves and whites really didn't mix. Even Sally Hemings, you still talk about in whispers, it wasn't true, this, that. Um, a big issue that happened was Brazilians started to change their mentality with a book that was released in 1933, sorry, by this writer Gilberto Freire. I'm messing up the name. Basically, he argued something against what the rest of the world was saying, which was that there's a superiority with being white as with versus being black, which meant that you were less intelligent, you were the lesser being. His book basically taught Brazilians that it was beneficial to them to be mixing, and that they were superior because they were mixing. This book still to this day is a point of national pride for Brazil. They're really proud to be a mixed nation. And anyways, so going back to history, between about 1870 and 1953, there was 5 million immigrants that came into Brazil. The two groups, basically, the Europeans that migrated went to the south, and there was about two groups of them. It was either farmers or coffee plantation. They worked on coffee plantations, and the southern part was mostly European, and the north and the northeast was that brown, black, native. In the south, 79.6% of them upper European population. And this is actually true, a little bit more of history, because the King of Portugal noticed that those southern tips that were bordering other countries were more prone to being invaded. So he took a certain group that is Azanis. I'm messing this up. It was basically a poor group in Portugal, the poorest group in Portugal, and he took them and moved them down there as sort of like a layer of protection in Brazil. But the Northeast is basically multicultural. About 62% is mostly mixed. This is still true today, and basically those are pretty much the numbers. But Brazil has really transformed from being a country that was very racist, a lot of segregation, a lot of truly believing that people of different color were lesser. However, now it is one of the most diverse countries in the world. You have blacks, browns, Asians, and they're all mixed together. So that's why I chose this topic, and hope that gives you a little more information about Brazil and race.